Welcome to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kibler, your net profit CFO, helping business owners like you grow their net profit one episode at a time. And now your host, Ryan Kibler.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Net Profit Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Kibler, the Net Profit CFO. Today I've got a very good friend with me, Mark Ryski. I am excited to interview Mark today. Mark is the CEO of HeadCount, really focused on looking at data in retail settings. So is the traffic to your store converting? We're going to get into all those kinds of things today. I am excited to learn more about it. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show.
Hey, Ryan, it's my pleasure to be on the show, and I'm a fan of your podcast, and I'm delighted to be here.
Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Mark, so we know CEO of HeadCount. Give my audience a little backstory of you, how you got to where you are today, and kind of, what point you're at, how far things have come. Give us a background.
All right. Well, let's go back in the time machine to what retailing was like in 1993. I know it's hard to go back 30 odd years, but that's where I started. And like many of us, we worked in retail as a part-time job while we were going to college. And I had such a job, and I was the marketing manager for a computer store.
Okay.
This was back in the day when a computer was $5,000 and you bought software off the shelf. Okay.
Got it.
I know this goes back to the day. But anyway, so my job was to place advertising, create promotions, and to ostensibly to drive sales. That was my job. And so we would do all kinds of things, radio remotes, newspaper ads, on-site radio remotes, a little bit of local TV, etc. And it was during one such promotion like this. We were a single location retailer, but we had about 50 staff. It was a pretty big store. And our promotions would drive traffic into the store. People would line up out front of our store to get in. Successful by virtually any marketing measure that you can imagine. Yet at the end of the day, the store owner would count the money in the till and say, meh, that was just okay. And that's what really bugged me, because as the marketer, I thought, what's wrong with this picture? I'm driving all this traffic into the store, but what's happening? People are coming into the store. They're wandering the aisles. We had about 25 sales associates, and they were really good, customer focused. They were really great performers, but it took time to engage with shoppers, understand their needs. Like I said, these PCs at that time cost hundreds or thousands of dollars. And so we were not converting those visits into sales. And that's where my journey began. I thought to myself, gosh, if we could just count how much traffic was coming into the store, that would give us a leg up to truly understand what the potential was. And so I scoured, there wasn't much of an internet to scour back in the day, but I found a dusty old copy of Chain Store Executive Magazine. And there was a little tiny ad for a company that was selling the original people counter device, an electronic basically an infrared beam you would stick on your front door, and it would log a count every time somebody walked through. And I thought, eureka, this is what we need. So I reached out to the company. It was going to cost $2,500 for this device. I went to the store owner. I said, hey, I'd like to buy this, and it'll help us understand the impact of marketing, etc. And he said, $2,500? We could do another radio remote for that. No, let's not do that. But I was so convinced, Ryan, that we should do this, that I went to a couple of the other students that were working in the store, and a couple of them were engineers. And I said, could you build me a basic traffic counter? A couple of infrared beams, dump the data into an Excel, and I can analyze it myself. They said, sure. So with $300 in parts from a local Radio Shack that I paid for out of my own pocket, I found myself in the traffic counting business. And so we installed it. It changed completely how we would measure the impact of advertising, schedule staff, and importantly, understand conversion rates. And that's led to now an over a 30-year career doing this. But the truth of the matter is I failed miserably in the first iteration, that I tried to sell other retailers on traffic counting. And you know what they said? Why would we want to count traffic? We just count the number of transactions in the till. That's all we need to do. And so I couldn't sell them on traffic counters. And so I gave it up. went on to an 8-year career with software company Intuit, Quicken, QuickBooks, TurboTax. And I was the head of the small business division for Canada before I left on a sabbatical after 8 years. And it was during that time that I was wandering through a major mall where I live in Edmonton, Canada, called West Edmonton Mall, at the time the largest mall in the world. And as I was walking through this mall, I'm looking at the retailers and I'm looking up at their entrance and I'm saying, they don't count traffic. They don't count traffic. They don't count traffic. And I thought, what's wrong with this picture? And so I thought, what if I brought store traffic analytics to retailers as a service where we collect the data, analyze it, interpret it, and charge retailers for just the reporting and the insights that we deliver? And that's what our business has become.
Love it. What a story. What a journey. Long, took you a while to get there, but I think deep down, right, you knew the benefits of what could be, right? I love it. Love that story. And just, didn't take no for an answer. Sometimes that's what it takes.
Well, it's even worse or better, depending on your perspective, because I thought I had figured out what retailers will respond to. So then I started to reach out to retailers. I never did go back into it. I said, I'm going to take a shot at building HeadCount, and started knocking on doors of retailers as a service. And I still got, why would we want to do this? Oh, keep in mind, this was 2003, still a little early for big data and analytics, and certainly well before anything to do with AI.
Sure.
And so I thought, what the heck? Like, what am I going to do? I'm an entrepreneur and now I'm desperate to generate business. And so I thought, what if I wrote a book about it? What if we tell the story of why traffic data is so vital to retailers and then use that as a platform to acquire new customers? And so on evenings and weekends, it took me about 1 year to do this. I wrote a book called When Retail Customers Count, and it was the first book ever written dedicated to the topic of retail store traffic analytics.
Love it.
And so I started firing out I had to figure out how to get, I'm not an author, I'm a data person and have retail background, but I figured out, okay, how to produce a book, get it done. When the first 50 copies showed up in my office, I started sending them out to CEOs of retail chains. And those books led to meetings because, as it turns out, well, CEOs will take the call of an author, not a salesperson. Sure. And so those calls led to meetings, the meetings led to business, and that's how our business grew. 5 years later, I thought, gosh, there's so much more we learned about this. I wrote a second book called Conversion, the Last Great Retail Metric. And that book is really what I thought would be the capstone of my career. Okay, so we started sending that book out and the business continued to grow. Everything was on a great trajectory. Then something happened in 2020. Let me just bring us back to this dark age. It's called the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yep.
Well, let me just remind you what happens to a company that provides retail traffic analytics to retailers when their stores close. There's nothing to count.
Yep.
And so we faced existential risk. And literally, I thought we were going to go out of business because retailers were failing. The future was so uncertain, but we persevered. What we learned is that there's a group of retailers that were considered non-essential, and those poor retailers had to close their doors and figure out how to do e-commerce and curbside pickup and do all those things, or they couldn't generate sales. But the other group of retailers considered essential needed our traffic analytics like never before. And so we made our way through the tumult of the COVID-19 pandemic, but that led into supply chain issues. If you recall the headlines, boats getting stuck in the Suez Canal. Okay, that led to hyperinflation. So another headwind for poor retailers. Oh, and let's throw tariffs onto the mix now for fun.
Yeah.
So brick and mortar retailers have had a long battle, but it was during these dark years through COVID and such that it made me reflect on store traffic and conversion analytics and the work that we were doing and how today it's never been more precious and more important. And so I wrote my third book that's coming out September 30th called Store Traffic is a Gift, The Retailer's Guide to Converting Visits into Sales.
All right.
And it takes the foundational concepts that I developed 30 years ago and brings them up to the current times that retailers are grappling with today. And so here we are again, and I'm about to send a bunch to CEOs all over again.
That's awesome. Well, you definitely found a way, that works for you, right? I love that you made it happen, right? Shifted from salesperson to author. Love that. Tell me a little bit about, retailers have had a rough time recently. I think we all can see that COVID pandemic. And again, as you mentioned, inflation and now tariffs. And then they've also had to deal with, online retail sales as well, like dealing with Amazon and the big boys that are really starting to do delivery and probably because of that, seeing less traffic in the stores. I mean, where do you see that going kind of in the future or in the near future here, maybe next 3, 5 years, and how retail deals with that and why that makes conversion even more important?
Well, I'll come back to the future in a moment, but I'll just say that it's what we learned through the pandemic is that store visit is far more precious and valuable than most retailers give credit to. There's a general presumption, and I experienced this with the retail store that I worked for back 30 years ago, that traffic equals sales. And retailers just believe get more traffic into the store and your sales will go up. But the truth of the matter is, and I have data to support it, you can have more traffic in your store and sales go down, or you can have less traffic in your store and sales can go up. So that's the first thing I want to say. But you need to count that traffic to start. And that's the crazy reality. I conducted, for research for this last book, I conducted a series of mall audits. I literally visited a sample of malls across North America, and I visited every retailer in those malls, and I captured which ones were counting traffic and which were not. And generally speaking, only about half of retailers even count traffic in their store.
Wow.
Think about it. This is precious. This is the lifeblood of their business, and they don't even know how many people came in the store. Importantly, now, some retailers will say, hey, look, I just count sales, and that's what matters. That's my customer count or my transaction count. But I would say the even more important number is how many people visited and left without buying, because that is the sales opportunity that you just missed. So look, you know what, Ryan, there's been a lot said about the retail apocalypse and online is going to destroy brick and mortar retailing. The truth just doesn't support, the facts don't support that. 80% of retail sales transactions are still conducted to this day in physical brick and mortar stores.
Very interesting. It's crazy.
Isn't that remarkable?
High. Yeah, you wouldn't think that number was that high, but that's crazy.
It is. However, here's what's also true. Online supports brick and mortar supports online. It's not an either or proposition. That online visit that a customer will have is often a precursor to a physical store visit when they're there to make a buy. You got to be able to do both well, but for gosh sakes, when somebody crosses the line of the threshold of your store, you should know they came and when they came. And if you do know how many people come right down to the hour of the day, you're going to be in a far better position to convert more of those visits into a sale.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think about, and I'm not a marketing guy, but as you're running different like sales promotions, to be able to tie traffic to that as well and say, well, what is it in this promotion that brought more traffic in or less traffic in, right? I think, from a sales perspective, to be able to drive sales, I think would be really important to be able to tie some traffic numbers to each promotion that you did.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, Ryan, you understand this. And a lot of people that don't work in retail, what a common reaction I get is, doesn't every retailer already do this? No, they don't. So you sort of have to have the data, which is a bit ironic in the world of big data and AI that we live today. And in fact, what's happened is retailers have become overwhelmed by the amount of data that they ingest in their point of sale systems, social media, labor management systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so now there's so much of it, it's hard to figure out what's the important signals and what's just noise or data. And that's where I find myself. And that's why I'm reintroducing this idea of store traffic as a gift. It's like discover cornflakes all over again. It's fundamental. Retail sales are only a function of three things: how much traffic you got times your conversion rate. That is how many of those visitors bought times average sale. That's it. If you want to drive sales, those are the three levers you get to pull. And if you don't measure it. If you don't quantify it, you're just throwing darts in the dark.
Yeah, love that. And I think, again, for your service to be able to summarize that for them, right, and pull in that data and help them kind of sift through and see like what hours your store is most popular, right? I just think headcount and traffic ties into so many things, right? As far as staffing, sales, you know, when you need a manager on site, all those kind of things. Just so powerful to have your hands on that data and have it summarized for you. And that's what HeadCount does a great job of.
That is the work that we do. And you know what? We've really been reluctant to expand into all kinds of data, passerby traffic, and this, that. I mean, what happens is, people try to invent new data and ideas and insights, and there's always a place for that. But I've been very reluctant to really go beyond really focusing on basic store traffic and conversion data, which can inform so many decisions. You mentioned a couple. Marketing is, how do marketers make marketing decisions without understanding how much traffic they're driving? Think about the online world. Online marketers from the very start wanted to understand traffic and conversion, period. Those are the key metrics. You tell me why it's any different in a physical store. You have to receive that traffic. You should understand what percentage of those visitors buy or don't buy. And I'll tell you this, Ryan, when you start to measure conversion rates and traffic to the hour of the day, what you start to see is traffic in the store, but conversion rates sagging. And right there, you can say, how is it that every Tuesday between 6 and 9 p.m., conversion rates drop in your store? There's plenty of traffic. So I can't tell a retailer why it's dropping, but I can tell them to the day of the week, the hours of the day when it's occurring. If you know where and when to look, that's half the battle at least. Staffing is one of the big keys. You look at the way retailers staff their stores. Often it's set on sales budgets. If a store sells more, they get more budget. You can have more staff. Great. But what happens when a store gets a lot of traffic, can't convert that traffic? Their sales may be declining despite that staff doing a tremendous job. Guess what happens to their labor budget? It goes
Decrease.
Down. Conversion rates continue to decline, et cetera, because retailers are not scheduling to traffic, they're scheduling to sales. And this it's a downward spiral is what happens. But there's sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to jump in and say, I mean, if you're scheduling to sales versus scheduling to traffic and really seeing like, look, our conversion rate is dropping, you could be scheduling staff into a time where you don't need additional staff because the traffic's not there, right? And then you could almost actually, like, as I think about it, and I'm a numbers person and, I have this rolling around in my head, you could schedule to sales and actually make your problem worse, right? Especially in today's day and age, I feel like most generally people are impatient anymore, right? We live in a on-demand, I've got to have this now kind of society. And I feel like even if you're going in to purchase like a major purchase, right? You don't want to wait. If you want to talk to a salesperson and ask more about the purchase and what you're buying, you don't want to stand there and wait 10 minutes on a salesperson. You just don't. Like, people don't have the patience for that, right? And so, like, as I'm thinking about it, again, if you're scheduling to sales, you could actually schedule and make your problem even worse.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And the retailers are doing what they think is right. But again, without failing to understand the opportunity size, everything is sort of a blind guess. And it really has other negative consequences. So for example, you could have a store team that's doing a great job. These frontline workers, it's hard. I don't care. You have to work in retail to know what this is like. It's a hard job. And so they're working hard. They're trying to convert. They don't have enough labor. Their numbers are going down. They get further punished because they get less labor. And then ultimately these people become disenfranchised. They leave the company. That turns into a turnover problem. And then they can't hire up, and it kind of goes on from there. I believe that retailers should be obviously scheduling to traffic, but they should also be compensating their store teams based on sales per visit, because that levels the playing field. You could have one store that only gets 100 visits a day, but if they're converting 50% of that traffic and have a high average ticket value, they're doing a great job. Another store may have 1,000 visits. And because they have this benefit of all this traffic, they could be doing a terrible job at conversion, but their numbers could still look solid and better. And that manager's likely getting promoted and rewarded, and the other one is not. And I think it's a travesty.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yes, that's could definitely follow that line of thinking. And again, that leads staff turnover problem, which is also expensive, right? Really, really crazy to think about, right? But one number impacts another. And I feel like as we've talked through this, when you're retail, when you're brick and mortar, that traffic number, by head count by the hour, by the day, by the time of week, over a regular period of time, is really foundational for a lot of other metrics and impacting factors on your business. That traffic number is foundational, it seems.
It is. And that's the thing. And it's like, Ryan, it's like the world moved past store traffic counting. Even a couple of decades ago, it's like, yeah, what else? What else can we do? And what kind of bothered me about that? It's like, but you're not doing enough even with the traffic data. Like if you're not collecting it, not applying it, not using it. Anyway, sometimes the most powerful ideas are the simplest ones. And I've just maintained, after all these years, focus on essentially these two very simple metrics, but powerful to this day.
And they also lead to a bunch of other calculations and metrics that tell you how your store's doing, right? Like what your sales are per hour, per head count, what your average ticket is, per person that walks in your store, that's kind of from the pricing side of things. But yeah, and it tells you how your sales staff is doing. I mean, there's just so many equations that traffic count, as you said, stick with the basics. It's the simple metric. It ties into so many other equations that you see that as a driving factor.
Yeah, you're spot on. Well, you're a numbers guy, so I'm probably speaking your language, but I was recently introduced at a conference by a client of ours, the CEO of a chain of drugstores and general merchandise stores up here in Canada. And I think the way he put it was perfect. And he said, traffic is the ultimate denominator to which you compare everything to that goes on in your store.
Love that.
If you're doing buy online, pick up in store, how many of those visits did you get during the day relative to your total traffic? If you're launching a new ad campaign or loyalty program, you can compare anything to what's going on in that store. And I would say, and I say this in the conclusion of the book, virtually any operational decision you make about your physical store can somehow, in some way, connect back to store traffic.
Love it. Love that. I think that is a great way to put it. It is the common denominator. So important, and again, I just, I'm with you. I'm just shocked that, you would have retail owners that don't know what those numbers are. I mean, you might as well operate your business with a blindfold on, right? Like it's just, you don't know what's going on if you don't know where your traffic numbers are. That's just crazy to me, right? It's like business owners that I've ran into that run their business by the bank account balance. You don't know what's going on in your business. You don't know that's the end result, right? That's the last number. You don't know what you've done to get to that number if you're not looking at your financials. It's just crazy. It is crazy. It's unimaginable for me.
Yeah, it's outcomes. They're focused on outcomes, and we get that. That's what you're solving for, but you need to know how to get there. And it's even worse, Ryan, because, retailers that struggle and they're trying to get their sales going again, they will almost always say, okay, advertise, promote. We got to do a promotion. We got to do more advertising. Drive more traffic into the store. Conversion rates are dropping. Sales might be very tepid, but they're just blowing these opportunities because they're not staffing stores, stocking them, serving the traffic that's already in the store. And so it continues to feed on itself. And it's that should change. Hopefully retailers will read my book and start counting traffic.
Yes, absolutely. So the third book that you've written, I highly recommend my audience check out the first two, but the third one, Store Traffic is a Gift, Converting Your Traffic into Retail Sales, that comes out in September.
Correct.
And
September 30th. Yep.
Okay. And you're going to have that on your website, on Amazon, available for purchase, I assume. Anywhere else they can get the book?
Everywhere books are sold.
All right.
Says
awesome.
my publisher. Yes, it will be widely available.
Awesome. And the release date for that is in September. What day in September?
September 30.
September 30. All right. Right before Q4, which is normally the busy time for retailers. So timely release. And hopefully, we have all this tariff stuff worked out in the marketplace between now and then. But either way, I would highly recommend get Mark's book. It's coming out very, very timely before Q4 or right before Q4. And definitely highly recommend reaching out to Mark, working with him, getting your traffic and head count numbers. Mark, where is the best place for my audience to connect with you, work with your company, start getting a handle on their traffic and head count data?
Thank you, Ryan. Simple, headcount.com. You can find, we have lots of content material there. I've been doing this for over 30 years and am now recognized as the worldwide leader. That's what you get for being desperate writing books as I have. But there's a sincere and utter passion that we have and my team has for helping retailers be successful with this. And we work with small independent chains, mom and pops, all the way up to enterprise class retailers that have thousands of stores.
Love it. Well, I highly recommend, for all my retailers out there that are listening, get with Mark, get with his team, get a handle on what your head count and traffic is. It is really the driver behind so many factors that will make you successful with your store. So highly recommend, I'm all about data, get a good handle on those numbers. And Mark, again, I just want to thank you for coming on the show and taking the time.
Thank you, Ryan. It was my pleasure.
Well, until next time, everybody, go accelerate your profits. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kimler. Make sure to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to check the show notes for our guest contact information and to connect with Ryan on his website, netprofitcfo.com.